Hello out there. Welcome to our podcast today. It's Coach Eric Johnson, the brand.
This is Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source. Good morning, EJ.
Morning, Aaron. How are you?
Cold. It's getting cold out here.
Yeah, it is.
That time of year.
Yes, sir.
But,
Yes, sir.
things are doing good. Why don't you want me to introduce today's topic?
Yeah, why not? And I'll just kind
Okay.
of go with the flow, as they say.
All right. It's the off season. What's the plan? What's the goal? I guess that's the short form.
Right.
What are athletes trying to do?
Yep.
You think, you guys are on their off season now. A lot of guys coming off of some of the fall sports and getting ready for the spring. We've got basically 2 months before high school sports start, and not a lot of time. Again, we always talk about, the time on the calendar and then the actual time that you spend, two different things. So we've got about 60 days of 60 available training days.
Yes.
But
I like that.
those days are going to be actual training days.
Right.
So you got to be strategic. You should have a plan and you should have a goal. And figuring out what you're going to get out of this short period of time before the spring season starts. So that's what we're going to talk about. What are some of your initial thoughts, EJ?
It's really interesting, Aaron, because a lot of our athletes that we see come into the shop, or just in general talking to coaches, and everybody's kind of winding down, but they're taking stock in what they've done so far in the fall or during the summer, and they're saying, okay, it's time to reboot. It's time to get out here and have a plan. And you said it, there's 60 days, and what are those available training days? So my initial thoughts for this, Aaron, is that players who ended the fall, which could have been probably about 2 to 3 weeks ago, a lot of these guys are really serious about moving forward, or have been in the gym for 2 weeks, 3 weeks already. Better than that, Aaron, they have been in the gym during the fall also. So their trajectory is a little bit different in training and gaining strength, because everybody says it's off season, get stronger, get bigger, get faster. That's a generic term, which, we agree upon. Yeah, we want to do that. But the base that maybe some of those athletes who've been training not only during the fall, but during the summer and the fall, and then the last 2 or 3 weeks, man, you imagine how much stronger they're getting right now compared to guys who are just starting right now. So, I always tell people, you better have a really good plan during these next 60 days to get bigger, stronger, and faster in order to try to achieve the success that you want to have in the upcoming year. So those are my initial thoughts. I kind of threw it back there a little bit, but if you're trying to get ready for your upcoming season for the spring sports, man, start going at it right now.
Yeah, I'll open with, there is no tomorrow. Basically, this time is going to go by fast with holidays and such. School finals, all those sorts of things. They really eat up a lot of athletes' times, and sometimes you have to cancel out some training days because of those sorts of things.
Right.
But you touched on two things that resonate with me. And the first was, there's really two types of athletes right now. There's those who have been doing things year round and have had a plan because they've mapped out their year and they've got that structure. And then there's those who haven't, quite simply, and I'm not going to beat those guys up for whatever reason, whether you're playing another sport, you just don't know what you should be doing. But yeah, and each of those are going to have to approach this differently. Those who already have a plan probably already have a plan right now, and they're executing. But to those athletes, I'd say, because we're coming to this last 60 days, think in terms of transfer. Are the things you're doing going to transfer directly into your sport and what you want to do. So you've kind of done maybe a lot of those guys, for instance, maybe with me have started like in September. So
Okay.
we've done a lot of our general prep sort of things, basic getting stronger, basic speed, that sort of thing. We're actually now segueing into transfer, bridging the things that we've built and marrying them with the movement patterns of the sport and that sort of thing. So for instance, maybe with some of the pitchers or hitters, now we've done a lot of our base strength and explosive work. And now we're starting to fine tune that by maybe with pitchers, we're doing mock throwing exercises, or you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
We're working on, dry throws, for lack of a better term.
Right.
For hitters, it might be now we're working on, mock swings and transfer, and seeing how the transfer, that speed and power we've developed is working to the swing, how it's even changed or modified their swing. Because again, as you get bigger, stronger, faster, there are going to be some corresponding changes in the things that you do, and you have to be able to acclimate those things. So maybe your swing gets a little off because maybe now your timing, you're a little bit faster. Same thing with pitchers. A lot of pitchers want me to speed them up sometimes. So now their body's moving faster. They've got to make those adjustments. So you just can't assume those things are going to happen. So you need a period of time where you're kind of bridging things together. So that way it becomes more natural and those things come out in your play.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because as I see transformation happening and watching guys that we train with together, I can see that being established. And for all those out there who are listening, I think that's really important. Whether you were training with Aaron or myself or anybody out there, and you've been doing this, you need to understand there is a game plan here about transferring and getting to the next season, to the next place. And so I think that's important, Aaron. A lot of times, that kind of resonated with me when you said, doing the dry stuff. Basically we're at shutdown right now, Aaron. I mean, there's no throwing for the pitchers. I don't have a lot of guys overdoing the swinging, like, oh, come in two or three times. Let's get some. No, we're just slowly progressing, seeing how the new power and speed is working. Do we need to make any adjustments in the swing because it's gotten more dynamic? We're a little bit shorter path to the ball. If we're talking about a hitter, we can do that because we're stronger in the core now. Our ankles are stronger. Our feet are better, more stable. Our lower body is in a better position. So I think that's important, that understand the transformation in what you're trying to accomplish in your goals. And that's planning. Right? I mean, that's just straight out planning. And I think if we can help people out there understand what does a plan look like, a little bit, that's another subject. We talked about that before, but it's off season, we're trying to achieve success for the next year. So I like what you said about that, about, the transformation of training.
Right. Now, on the flip side of that, you've got the athlete who hasn't done much training because, like I said, maybe they're playing football or some other fall winter sport that's basically gobbled up all their time.
Right.
So those athletes kind of have to sit down and evaluate, okay, I've got these 60 days. What can I get done? And maybe they just key in on one or two key aspects. It could be getting back in shape for your sport.
Okay.
Because a lot of athletes detrain during their competitive season.
Right.
For instance, I'm getting a lot of football players in who are in terrible shape. Even though they've been playing all year, they're in terrible shape. They're not in training shape. Okay. So that's one aspect to think about. Hey, am I in shape? And do I have the endurance and durability to go a full season?
Okay.
Because a lot of athletes will err on the side of, okay, I want to work on these skills, which is fine, but they don't have the endurance and durability to last a season. especially
Gotcha.
guys like, who were throwers and pitchers.
Mhm.
So they end up with some arm injuries because maybe either they're rushing into their throwing activities because they have no choice, the season's upon them, or,
Right.
they do too much too soon. So, my advice, especially to those athletes, is take your time and get your body ready for the demands of that sport from a
Mhm.
physical standpoint so that you don't have an injury, you don't have, and maybe that delays your progression. Maybe you're not throwing as hard at the beginning of the season.
Okay.
Maybe you're looking at throwing harder in the middle to the later part of the season,
Right.
that sort of thing. For position players, getting out and doing that sprinting, that running, that jumping, because, again, I laugh all the time. Why are these guys pulling hamstrings running from home to first? But it's because their bodies aren't conditioned to sprint. Because you can jog all day and you can jog miles and that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
It's not the same thing as the anaerobic demands that baseball requires once you hit the ball. Even swinging the bat, you got guys who are hurting their back, hurting their hips because they're not ready to be that explosive through that sort of activity in that type of plane. So,
Mhm. Oh, I
say,
like that.
hey, initially, what are those things that are going to keep me safe and just keep me out on the field? Then second layer on, okay, what are the things I can do to maybe enhance my performance? Maybe I'm working on my speed. Maybe I'm working on my lateral movement. Maybe I'm working on, again, a little bit more pop in my bat. Then layer those things on. So I would say that would be my approach. And you can't do everything. So maybe, like I said, just pick one or two areas um, to focus on and then understand I'll do continual training during the season.
That's important. I think that you hit on two things. I think that's important, and maybe you can talk to that point here a little bit. Training during the season a little bit. What do you mean by that? Because a lot of people don't. They say, "Okay, I train for the season, I'm done," and they go
Yeah.
play the sport. So, can you elaborate a little bit on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Even those who do it right and do an off season sometimes have the mentality of, hey, well, the season's here. I don't need to train anymore. And that's completely um, incorrect.
Incorrect.
You need to be able to maintain the gains that you've built up. And for the high school athlete, the more important season is not the high school season, but the summer season.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, one, maintain what you want, what you built up to go through the high school season, but then again, you have to be ready for the summer season. And just like I said with football or any other fall sport that you're playing, there is an amount of detraining that happens just because you're playing so many games. You just
Right.
don't have the available training hours to put in like you would in an off season. So it becomes important to have some kind of in-season maintenance program that you institute during the season to keep your skill level up, protect you from injury, all those other things, and then gives you a shorter ramp up to get ready for the summer because you've already still got a pretty good baseline. You're
Right.
maintaining a decent
Right.
baseline. Now, it may not be way up here, but if it only drops a little bit, it's easier to get back up to that point, once you have a little bit of break after the high school season and you maybe tune up those sorts of things and then go into the meat of your summer program.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, I see a lot of athletes, when they go through their high school season or they get to the summer, into the summer, and I can see at the end of the summer where an athlete gets tired. I do. I can see that especially if they've been training all year and naturally you're going to get you're going to get fatigued. Your body just doesn't want to trigger like it did early in the season or in the middle or when you're at your peak.
Yeah.
I get that. I think one of the things that also resonated in your first analysis was that these guys have some core strength. I'm talking about the athletes, a multi-sport athlete, football player. Now he's going into their spring and they have the strength. But you said something funny to me and made me laugh. Is like, you get these guys back into the shop and they're out of shape, man. Why are they out of shape? I mean, I don't get that. I mean, to a lot of, is it because they start to slow down their training during football season or during that fall season, and they're not in the same shape? It's just, I gotta get ready for the next game and I gotta get healthy. What can you help me with that mentality? Because I see this too. Players come back from their fall sport to get into baseball, and it's automatic injury. They think they can come back real hard. Hey, I've just played football, I'm in good shape. That's not necessarily true, because before I let you elaborate on that, I want to say when I was going to spring training, I worked myself into shape. Even though I was in great shape going to spring training, I worked my way back into baseball shape the first 10 days just to kind of get acclimated. I wouldn't go out there and burn it out right away because I know I'd get hurt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit, Aaron?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things you mentioned. Let's try and remember all of them. But first would be, again, when you're in a competitive season with most sports, you're working on tactics, you're working on, technique, you're shadowing through scenarios. So that tends to take up the bulk of your practice time.
Okay.
There's not a lot of training going on. But what happens is people mistake that for training. Again, there's time in and then there's the right time in. And it's just kind of like what we talk about, people think practice is training, and getting out of that mentality. Practice is not training. It's time spent doing something else related, but it's not the physical development or the physical upkeep of the body. And so, athletes tend to think that, okay, well, I'm having games and we're practicing, I'm fine. But if you kind of dissect that and you put it in a pie, think about how much of your time at practice is standing around, not activity, but receiving instruction,
right.
Listening to what the coaches are saying, how we're going to do this, how we're going to do that. And then another part of that is the actual simulation, right? But all simulation isn't at full speed, right?
Right.
So you're not necessarily firing the body all the time like you would in a workout. Okay. And so the only time you're really giving maximum effort is when in the game. But in games like baseball and football, you have a lot of starts and stops. And so you have a lot of not necessarily dead time, but it's not, continuous activity. The other sport that might relate to that or is a little bit different than that may be soccer, where you're a lot of constant moving, that sort of thing. So those are the things that people don't think about when they're thinking, okay, I'm transitioning from one sport to another, I'm in shape. Well, not necessarily. And also the demands of each sport might be a little bit different. So, coming from one sport to another, it's going to be different, physical demands, whether it's energy systems, whether it's anaerobic, aerobic, that sort of thing is going to be different. And you may not have, since you haven't worked on that energy system, well, you're not going to have any gas in the tank for that when you go to that next sport.
Right.
The other aspect is movement patterns. Well, the movement patterns for football and baseball are completely different. Right? Especially if you've got a lineman, who happens to be a third baseman, transitioning from one to the other. So, athletes get hurt because now they're doing things where maybe in football, you're doing things more straight ahead, that sort of thing.
Right.
And maybe not as much lateral movement, again, depending on your position. But now you get into baseball and most of your things are rotational.
Yes.
Doing those short burst lateral movements, depending on your position. Well, the muscles haven't acclimated to that, aspect of it. And you haven't giving them a ramp up period to go through that through training. So what happens? Guys get hurt.
So, with that said, as guys get back into training for these spring sports, what I'm kind of hearing and understanding from our experience is that, going through shadow movements. You
Yes.
get the body acclimated with the new movement patterns or stresses of these muscles that haven't been used recently is a good way to go, right?
Yeah, I always tell the athletes this, I say keep it close. And what I
Okay.
mean by that is, yeah, you're in football season, you're pretty tired and you're doing things, but maybe, pick up the bat 2 days out of the week, 3 days out of the week, and shadow through some swings or hit some easy stuff off a tee, hit some
Right.
wiffles off a tee. For throwers, get out and just throw the ball against a bounce back or
Oh, okay.
play catch, that sort of thing, so that you
Yeah.
kind of keep those movement patterns close, even though
Yeah.
you're not getting you're not training and getting full workout, but those movement patterns don't become foreign to you, and you don't get so rusty when you're kind of in that rush to go from football to baseball or whatever sport it is, and now you kind of are trying to hurry up and catch up, to your peers and everyone else, or with what the program is doing.
Yeah. I like that. I like what you said there. It jogs a lot of memories. One, I was before I had the Golf Channel on this morning. Okay, I'm an avid golfer, right?
Yeah.
So they were talking about Tiger Woods and the Hero Challenge. So kind of listened to Brandel Chambly, controversial guy in golf, they say. But he was talking about a guy named Will Zalatoris who was injured. He's 27 years old and had back surgery. And he talked about the demands of early specialization in one sport and how being a multi-sport athlete or having PE, as you and I always say, or presidential physical fitness kind of competitions is good for athletes because it helps them work on other muscle groups. And I think you just said that in a nutshell is that, hey, be a multi-sport athlete, but don't get far away from the sport you're doing. Keep your muscles still moving, get them all acclimated, get all your muscle groups working so you can become a complete athlete, And I think he said that earlier, I was listening to him. I said, man, boy, that resonates with what Aaron and I were saying all the time, Here's a lead analyst and one of the best in the business in golf talking about specialization in golf. It can be detrimental to the structure and development of the body, and that you need to train the whole body and to be a really good athlete in any sport. So I kind of like that, and that kind of goes back to our subject, having a plan to try to achieve success coming up. So that kind of resonated with me this morning.
Yeah, and you guys could go back and listen to, we just did a recent podcast earlier this month, is sports specialization killing athleticism in young athletes? So kind of a related podcast, and I know we've done another one on sports specialization as well,
Mm-hmm.
maybe about a year ago, but they're both in our podcast library. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's just really sitting down, taking stock in where you're at, what you need to do, understand that you can't get everything done, but time can work against you or can work for you. It's just depending on how you use it. So, I would keep that in mind and go from there.
Yeah. Well, sports fans out there, thanks for listening today to our podcast, The Brand and the Source. I'm Coach EJ, The Brand.
It's Coach Aaron, the Source. Reminding you guys to hit that like button and send any comments our way, topics. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you.